It is 3 o'clock, which means that we have about an hour, and I fully recognize that our panel stands between you and your happy hour. So we're going to make sure that this is engaging, this is entertaining, and it's an incredible topic, and I have some amazing folks that are going to help us work through this really important conversation. So I want to jump right in. We're talking about permitting today, and it's interesting because I think over the past several hours, virtually every panel that I have listened to, the topic of permitting has come up at least once or twice in conversation. And so you all know the drill by now when it comes to using the app. Make sure you put your questions in. We'll save about 10 minutes or so near the end of our conversation, and I'll throw some questions from the audience to our amazing panelists. But I'm going to start with a little bit of a challenge, and I have some things that I wanted to kind of talk about. So we've heard a lot, I think, today that permitting is the barrier. I'm air quoting, the barrier to projects. When I say projects, it's energy projects, it's building projects, it's infrastructure. And whatever it might be, what we keep hearing over and over again is that permitting is just too slow. It's too complex, it's too fragmented, and in many cases, what I have heard is absolutely true. It's true in my jurisdiction in Colorado, and in fact, there was something that came up in one of the panels this morning about developing a shot clock, and in Colorado, the idea is that could we put a limit on the number of days before permits are actually executed? And so we're all sitting in this moment when there's this real cost, I think, from moving too slowly, increasing, housing costs, escalating construction budgets, and delayed delivery. But I also want to acknowledge and recognize that permitting didn't happen by accident. And this is, I think, the tension that I really want to get into with the three of you. The process exists to protect things that matter, to protect people and places and culture and ecosystems and communities. And especially, I would say, in Hawaii, it's been really evident to me in some of the conversations from our keynote speaker this morning that land use decisions, I think, carry meaning far beyond the boundary of a project. And so this is something that's kind of been bouncing around in my head for a little while. And I would say, at least in my perspective, permitting is a full contact sport. And I think I've heard that a little bit repeated today, which is like, how do we deal with this big issue? And what I want to dig into with the three of you is really what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Because I see that we're holding two truths at once. We need to move faster, we know that. We need to do it in a way that builds trust. But maybe the issue is not just speed, meaning what I say is that the tension that I'd like for your help with is, can we think about not making a choice between speed and moving fast and doing it right? Our system should make those the same thing. And I guess that's kind of the hypothesis that I want to explore with you. So that tension, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to abuse my role as a moderator more than once. I plan to push us, or you all, to get a little specific in some of your comments. Maybe a little uncomfortable, we'll see, who knows. Okay, so I don't want to read any bios. You all are fully capable of doing that. What I do want to say is, as we get to the end, if you have questions that we don't answer, I'm sure you can find these three fine folks outside to continue conversation. But I want to start just to my right, Representative Gregory Iligan. Obviously, you serve in the Hawaii State Legislature. I've been really excited to hear how you have really been focused on things like energy, land use, community resilience. I'm really excited to hear more from you about the speed legislation and the task force. And so I'm going to come back and ask you a specific question about that. I'm going to go down to Molly on the end. We've gotten to know each other just a little bit, and the role that you've been playing with the governor's, I'm going to get this wrong, in the California, you were the Deputy Director for Energy and Climate at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. And I think that gives you this really cool perspective of what it actually takes to unlock investment and scale some of the deployment. And I'm really eager to hear you talk about the Clean Energy Permitting Initiative and the launch of a toolkit that you were fundamental in developing. And last but not least, Leila Bonajamani, I always get your name wrong, so this is what I'm going to do. Bana Jamali. You're the CEO and founder of Symbium, and what I've been really intrigued with some of your work is you are working to rethink how permitting systems actually function. And so how you use technology to make them more transparent, more navigable, and I really want to get into the conversation with you about how do we actually fix permitting systems. So, all right, we're gonna ease in with a little bit of a soft entry point. I'm just gonna ask each of you to maybe talk about how your work and how you specifically connect to this topic around permitting. And then I want you to challenge my assumption on this issue of what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Is it just speed or is there something more complex? Representative, you wanna go first? I'll let you tee it up.
You had a very good question that I wanted to hear the private sector answer, and then I was gonna chime in, but is it okay if they go?
Of course.
Okay, go ahead.
Don't fight.
I'm not the private sector. Well, I guess that leaves me.
Let's do it.
So I think, the real problem we're trying to solve. So Leila Beni Jamali, I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of a company called Symbium. We're based in California. We were born out of Stanford University's AI lab. We're an offshoot of AI. We're not a predictive AI system. The type of AI that we've used is a branch of AI called logic programming that allows our permitting system, the compliance checks that we perform, to be 100% accurate and deterministic. So you're not asking the question 4 times, for example, in ChatGPT and getting 4 different answers. That's not acceptable when we're talking about building in energy codes where there's a safety issue. So the real problem, and I guess the question was the challenge to you, as I think the real problem that we're trying to solve here is we're reimagining the user experience of permitting. And that necessarily means that we have to incorporate into that system a lot of trust, that system has to be reliable. Second, it has to be highly scalable. So it's not good enough to be a solar app. You have to be an app that is, or an experience that is highly scalable to many other related project types without millions of dollars of additional government subsidies to make that happen. That I think is unacceptable in today's world. And then third, most importantly, we have to always incorporate the human element. We're building these systems for humans. And so necessarily us as humans have become the most critical component as the framers of the problems in these systems. So that's where I would say we sit.
Would you like to go or should I go?
Well, I just wanted to add, to what Leila's talking about, because one of the things that we're looking to implement and improve for permitting is the use of technology. So working with large-scale, utility-scale projects, everything is approved by the local planner, the planning commission, the local elected, the supervisor, city council. So, but what we've learned through our permitting initiative is that there is a lot of back and forth when a developer or applicant submits the application, of the back and forth because it's missing, they have to go and revise it, and sometimes it just gets kicked out because it's taking too long. And a planner, they're not just looking at one single thing, they're trying to improve housing, the business, restaurant, and everything else. So if the developer doesn't come in with a complete application, they're gonna go to the next one. And by the time they come to yours, it's like 30 days later. So what we're looking to do is use something like a Symbium or that concept to shorten the time frame so that way, the AI or technology can do beep, beep, boop, 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 and say yes, no, green, red, pink, and kicks it right back to the developer, and they get it back in time. So once everything's complete, then it goes to the human person to actually review and look at the documents, thereby saving some time, shortening the delays, which we all know increased costs, gets passed down to ratepayers.
I agree with both of you. And the thing that Leila was talking about with AI and the human element, I 100% as an elected official have to think about my constituents. And when we were working on the speed task force, for those of you who don't know, last year I was appointed as the chair for economic development and technology. And I really wanted to figure out what could I do for businesses that would make a significant impact. And when I talked to different businesses, and actually Doug Adams is here, I was at his house, we were talking to a bunch of the chamber members, and one of the things they said was permitting was one of the hardest barriers that they had. So that first year, I decided to tackle permitting. And when we created this SPEED task force, which stands for Simplifying Permitting for Enhanced Economic Development. Getting the name right was the first business of order that I had to do. One of the things that I wanted to make sure is that human element, which is the users. Because sometimes creating these task force, and I like what the other panelists said, that it's without action, and I'm telling you, we have action, it's just a social group. I really wanted to make sure there were users in the task force because it can't just be all government entities. Because when you talk about government entities, they will tell you staffing is a problem, they will tell you that the application, there's too many errors, but the users have a different perspective. They won't say staffing is an issue. There were 6 different types, there was actually 4 different types. One was the new homeowner builders. So there were 2 members there. Then there was the small businesses, there were 2 members there. And there were commercial developers and residential developers. And so that's 8 members total of users now in that task force talking to the permitting agencies and coming up with solutions for permitting. And I have to share with you some of those solutions, but I feel like I'm over my time as a panelist. So then it looks like Jonathan is willing for me to share some of those solutions. I'm very proud that last year we were able to establish this task force. And I think for those government folks, they're familiar with the word PIGs. They're the permitted interaction groups. The first PIG was the building permit PIG. The second PIG was with DOH with the individual wastewater systems. And then SHPD with state historic preservation. I think a lot of you understands that SHPD is like the black hole and needs to be actually fixed right off the bat. And I actually have something to share with you on SHPD. And on top of that, with the IWS, they had this mindset of not wanting to do anything new and different. But because we were breaking down the silos and them hearing from different county perspectives within the PIGs, they were more open to try out different solutions. One of those results coming out from the PIG with the IWS is that this August of this year, we're having the first ever pre-approved, so I'm spitting, I'm so excited about it, that it's a pre-approved design for an IWS system. That's insane. Never before were Department of Health interested in a pre-approved design. Now we're going to have our first ever in our history without any legislation in August. That's amazing. Now thank you. See, at least one guy appreciates it. Then the second is that for SHPD, and I wanted to actually read it to you because we passed the legislation, and I want to read it because it's so much more impactful. When Jonathan talked about shot clock, I know everyone here knows there's shot clocks, but they just ignore the shot clock. And there's no repercussions for those shot clocks. So what's the point of having a 90-day shot clock when there's no repercussion for the department? Well, I have to read this because this is now, once the governor signs it, becomes law in SHPD. And this is one of the biggest bottlenecks that we have in our permitting system in Hawaii. So the department shall provide written concurrence or non-concurrence within 90 calendar days or within 35 calendar days if no historic properties are adversely affected by proposed construction, alteration, disposition, or improvement after the department has processed a complete submittal filed by the property owner. The department shall certify a complete submittal within 5 business days of its filing. So that's the shot clock. That's nothing new. The most important part of this is the next part. It's the proposed construction, alteration, disposition, or improvement of any nature shall not be commenced, or in the event it already began, until the department has given its written concurrence or non-concurrence. If the department, here's the part, if the department fails to provide written concurrence or non-concurrence within 90 calendar days or within 35 calendar days, if no historic properties are adversely affected by the proposed project, after receiving and certifying a true and complete submittal from the property owner, the property owner may assume the department's concurrence for the proposed project and may move forward to the next step in the compliance process. That's huge. You can have a shot clock, but without it actually moving forward after that shot clock, it means absolutely nothing because you're still stuck. This allows most projects that doesn't have any historic preservation triggers to move forward. And I apologize again for taking too long. I actually have way more results that I would like to share with you, but I feel like I'm talking too much.
I'm waiting for the mic drop.
I have 2 more that's very important, but again,
All right, don't lose them. I'm going to come back to you. And I want to talk a little bit with you, too, about some of the lessons from the task force in terms of maybe some of the surprises that you might have seen. But, Molly, I want to bring you in. One of the things that you talked about when we were chatting about the way California has been thinking about this, it's not a regulatory approach. It's more like, how do we develop incentives? How do we develop toolkits? And so I want to maybe ask you to speak a little bit more. You kind of touched on it lightly in your introduction about the toolkit that you worked on. And then I'm wondering, is there something that's transferable when you think about the lessons that you've learned that maybe would pair with what the representative just talked about in terms of best practice?
Sure. So a little bit of California Energy 101 real quick to kind of get to where I am today. So in California, I think back in 2020, there was brownouts. And so the governor issued an executive proclamation that directed the state energy agencies to work more closely together to ensure that that doesn't happen again. So the energy agencies are the Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, and CAISO, the grid operator. And then they created the energy unit at GoBiz, and so I became part of what we now call the TED task force, so is tracking energy development. And so the Public Utilities Commission, what they do is that they issue procurement orders that tells the utilities, the load-serving entities, to procure an X number of amount of new clean energy every however many years. And so those utilities, like California's PG&E, SCE, SDG&E, they will go out and contract with a developer. For example, I think Clearway was here earlier, NextEra, to build these utility scale projects. And those are the projects that California as a state are expecting to come online to provide grid reliability, but also to reach our 2045 carbon neutrality goals. So there is a stake in it for us. And what TED does is that we are a forum for developers to come to us whenever they have an issue, throughout their projects. And, since I've started this job, which has been about close to 4 years, there's 4 issues that come up again and again and again. Permitting, either at the state, local, or federal level, transmission issues, interconnection, and supply chain. And so what we did, how we tackled the permitting was that, a lot of these projects have to go through the local, process. And there's 58 counties in California, 450 plus cities. Everyone does it a little bit differently. And what we heard a lot was that they wanted some more transparency into some of these processes and certain standardization, if that's possible. So we kickstarted the permitting initiative and surveyed and talked to all the local planners, developers, and stakeholders, whoever wanted to talk to us about what their pain points were in permitting utility scale projects, what the opportunities, were in dealing with some of these, challenges and barriers, and what they wanted to see, what would really help them. And so throughout this engagement and stakeholder process, that's how we develop the toolkit and also the playbook. The playbook is an overview of what the energy landscape is and what a project has to go through. Not only do they have to go through the local permitting process, but they have to get into the queue with the CAISO grid, and there are, they have to get a contract, a PPA. So there are many things that they have to do along the way to finally come online. And so, and some local jurisdictions don't even know that. I had a local planner call me and said, hey, I saw them on this list, and they said they're going to build it here. It is a 300 megawatt project, but there's no other information. We want to be ready when they come to us and submit this permitting application. And I asked him, where did he see the list, or where did he see the project? It was on the CAISO queue. He said he even talked to the property owners, and the property owners said, they have not bought any of our land. It's still ours. And so he's just running around trying to figure out where this is. And so I had to explain, well, just because you're on the CAISO queue doesn't mean you're a real project yet. You're a wannabe project. And there's so many other steps to take for them to actually be ready to submit a permit. And so part of the playbook is just providing kind of like that overview of what a project goes through to educate the local jurisdictions. And the toolkit of resources are model ordinances, because we saw that many of the local jurisdictions are beginning to put up moratoriums for battery projects because they are afraid of, fires, the safety risks, thermal runaway, fact sheets. A lot of these projects, because they are approved by the local electeds, by a board, and there is a public stakeholder process that they have to go through. And so when they invite the community to talk about the project, they usually don't have just information about these technologies. So we developed some fact sheets that they can use to give out to their community about what the technology does, what are the benefits that can come to their community, such as economic benefits, potential jobs, property tax revenues, and things like that, so they can consider the pros and the cons, and when they're looking to review the project, these are the things that they should be looking at. And a few other things, we did like an overview of building a project on tribal lands. What does that mean? Because they are a whole separate animal, right? Because they're on tribal lands, they have their own rules. It's usually they have to go through the federal entities and not through state. So what does it mean, and how interested are they in building some of these renewable energy projects, and who can they go talk to? So some of those are in the toolkit that we had developed for local jurisdictions to be able to take and kind of mend and tweak to whatever fits to their community. So that's how we approached the permitting aspect of this and trying to speed that up.
Got it. So, Layla, when Molly was talking, I saw you nodding. I want to connect a couple perspectives here. Molly, what you were talking about feels deeply human-centric. It's a lot of building literacy for communities and developers. But Layla, there's also a lot of momentum right now in digitizing and streamlining a lot of permitting systems. And I think Symbiom's been really pioneering some of that work. And what I would love to have you explore and talk a little bit about is, when does it make sense, and when does permitting systems, when does it lend itself to that automation, and when does it make sense to really connect into that human-centric side of things? So I'd just love to press on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I was nodding because I've never sat in between such sage and verbose co-panelists. So I'm glad to hear it's my turn. But I have to say, like, I'm super excited to hear about what you guys are doing in Hawaii, and we're excited to support it however we can. That bill that you were talking about earlier, which it sounds like it's kind of on the agenda, right? There's similar legislation that was passed in Texas and in Florida that also does away with this sort of like, if it doesn't get approved within a period of time, I think it's like 2 days, then the project can commence. You can just go ahead and build it. And there's arguments on both sides of why that works really well and where that can be quite dangerous. And so when we have legislation like that, or any type of state mandate, there's some, and this is why I was nodding too, is like, we can do some really incredible things at the state level to help local communities and installers of all sizes, not just the really large installers, but the small companies as well, which actually outnumber the large installers by a landslide. And one of those things is to make sure that some of these legislative mandates are drafted in a way that they're technology agnostic. So we're not naming any particular technology in the legislation. That unfortunately has happened in states like California, if you can believe it, and Maryland, Minnesota. It almost happened in Texas and Hawaii and Florida, but they said no. So good on you, Hawaii, for rejecting that. There's also some really important legislation that is coming down the pike, and if you're not members of the Hawaii Solar Energy Association, Rocky Mold is here. He's the executive director of that group. We're a member and a proud sponsor of it, and we learn a lot just from the Hawaii side of things from Rocky's group that we take to other states and say, hey, this is how these guys are doing it, and it's super smart. Because why? Because it's inclusive of the voices of these local installers, but also the local building departments. And you can't have one without the other. I mean, it just doesn't work. But I forgot the rest of your question.
I was asking, when does the automation, what kind of situation does it make sense, and when do you need more of a human-centric?
Yeah, so I think, like when we talk about what I like to call not AI, but intelligent automation, that's going to be sort of like a newer phrase that you're going to hear more often. It's just kind of making its rounds in academia, but it's going to be more popular, I think. The right time when we talk about permitting is when the regulations and the processes are so dense that it makes no sense to have multiple parties do multiple passes at something that can deterministically be reviewed in an automated way. That's when it makes sense. It doesn't make sense where we have discretionary reviews of things, like, for example, we want to make sure that the look and feel of a particular area is consistent. That is a great use of human engineering. We want to make sure that we're taking into consideration all of the local nuances of this region, because there's fires, there's floods, there's snow and wind loads, a lot of the stuff that we see, with solar projects. That's where human input is extraordinarily important. And those reasons are actually the reasons why many of these state mandates do not work, because there cannot be a one-size-fits-all solution. And I can't stress this enough. It will be a gross failure to assume that one solution is going to solve everything. That solution has to be flexible enough, just like TurboTax, to incorporate all of the regions of regulations in every single state to make sure that it's being processed correctly.
So a follow-up to that, and this is something that I'd like all three of you to maybe respond to. I would think, at least in my experience, a lot of advanced permitting tools can make systems faster and easier to navigate. At the same time, they can widen gaps if communities don't have equal access or digital capabilities. And so I think about the equity piece of this too. How do you think about that when designing things like AI-enabled permitting systems? And I would maybe start right with you, Leila.
So I think the most important thing is like you take a community-centric approach. You know, you really have to sit down, and what we like to do is even shadow the permit counters to understand what are the types of things that people are actually doing. You know, like we're trying to bring these systems, I don't know what everyone else is doing, closer to the human experience, not farther away from it. So we need to understand what exactly is happening at the counters. What are the kinds of questions that people are asking? Is it, I don't know which form to fill? Or is it, what will this project, how will this project impact the tax valuation of my property if I build it? Or is it, I'm not sure what I'm allowed to do or what I'm required to do, or how much I'm supposed to pay in fees? And if these are the kinds of questions that we're starting to hear over and over again, well, then we have to shift our focus to solve for that. So I think that it's always going to start with understanding what should the human experience look like? How do we bring it closer to the human experience? And of course, that's different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But that system isn't, you know, any type of tool is not necessarily the best tool for a large jurisdiction, a small jurisdiction. All of these folks have different needs. And candidly, I've seen jurisdictions that are so small that they may have one plan checker and they're using Excel spreadsheets, and that's perfectly fine. They don't need to bring in, you know, an Excella or a Central Square or Tyler Technologies to kind of like revamp their entire permitting systems. That's too much for them, you know? So we really have to meet people where they are.
And regarding the equity piece, I look at it as a person who is new to the permitting system, who probably they're only going to go there one time, and they don't understand what the process looks like. And then the other side is, this is a developer who uses the system frequently and knows what to do and what to fill out and what to sign. And figuring out a department that can facilitate both types of customers and making sure that at the end of the day, they get what they need for the permitting process. And why we really wanted to make sure that we can serve all those customers is because it's those new homeowners who are going to have more errors in their application compared to the developers who's used to filling out the application. And when Leila was talking about the state mandate of really it not being the solution to just have like a blanket law to fix everything, that's absolutely right. You can't necessarily have a law that's just gonna magically fix all our problems, but we can fix and have different laws that could help parts of the process. For example, using AI, what I've discovered, because I'm a firm believer of technology, and I thought that we could do some sort of all-encompassing portal so that way you just fill out one application and you can have a permitting application for Maui, for Kauai, Oahu, Big Island, and that would make things so much easier using tech to do that. But what I discovered was that, and we only have 4 counties here compared to California. I can imagine it being a mess there. So if we could do it, I'm pretty sure it's possible. But what I found out is that these counties all have different permitting systems. Like, for example, Maui has maps. Hawaii Island has Epic. Kauai has Click2Gov or ePlan. And Honolulu has their H&L build. And each of their inputs and outputs are different. And so trying to get this one portal didn't make sense. So that whole state mandate didn't make sense. However, we could piece it out. And what I was sharing with Layla, that a bill that we were trying to fund was with Epic, they launched in 2021. So they're more mature with their system. And they were ready for a pre-compliance check with applications. So that way we can automate these applications before they even go into the system, ensure that they're fully like perfect. So now we reduce the error problems with our applications. And when they go in, it's more perfect than it was before the AI, let's just use that since it's a nice word to say, to fix all the errors in that application. So I want to just quickly say that because equity really, we want to make sure that new family who just wants to build their home is able to go through the permitting process with ease, as well as the person whose job it is to develop all these housing and commercial development.
Yeah, Molly, I'm going to come back to you, but I know, Layla, you wanted to jump in on this.
Yeah, I just want to sort of, I think it's appropriate to follow up here. So, you know what I want to see in terms of a law is I want to see a law that mechanizes the laws. So basically makes the laws not PDFs or textbooks. That's like, technology from 200 years ago. I want to see laws that are actually computer readable. And it doesn't mean that it has to be fed into AI, but it can be used for so many different things, and anyone can build something. And I want to see these laws, these mandates, if you want to call it that provide enough specificity in them, clear objectives, with specificity for how you can achieve that objective, such that anyone can build that system. Not that it has to be a system like the thing that NREL built. Who cares about what NREL built? That's like technology from 20 years ago. It should be something that our children, not our children, I don't have any children with you people, but your children, the college students, academics, innovators, the states themselves, anyone can build that system. That's the kinds of laws that I'm really excited about, is if we can pass those kinds of laws that actually mechanize the regulations, that would be really interesting.
Well, we just did that this year.
Oh, good. I'd like to see that. Yeah, that's
I can
very
tell
exciting.
you all about it.
Yeah.
I love this so much. Thing one, thank you for calling it NREL. I think the folks in the audience that work at NREL appreciate you still calling it NREL, by the way. Molly, I want to...
Happy to talk to them.
Molly, I want to come back to you because when I was looking at the toolkit, I was kind of intrigued with how you were approaching this idea of how do we make sure community-led projects, how do we make sure smaller developers and local businesses can still participate successfully. So I haven't left this equity question yet. I wanted to bring you in and make sure you have a chance to talk about it.
I mean, while the toolkit is focused mostly on utility scale, but it does bring in the smaller jurisdictions, right? So while California is a big state, a lot of the areas that are being developed right now, over time, they're not going to be able to anymore because the land's going to be eaten up by all the projects. And, we're looking at 20,000 megawatts of contracted, in the next 3 years. That means that's a few hundred projects. And we need to deploy that, for the next 15, 20 years to reach carbon neutrality. So the areas where they can't build, they're going to the new areas. And these guys have not done anything before like this. So the toolkit is to help the smaller communities too. When it does come to them, they have a framework to reference, like, okay, this is how it was done, this is how we can do it. If we're gonna pass an ordinance or create an ordinance of how to build this, a solar project, a battery project, a geothermal project, that these are what's been done, these are the best practices that they can pull from. So that is helping, the smaller scale and developers as well, because there are huge, big developers, and there are some smaller ones. And so they can use the same tools to help them like engage with the local community, because we did put a community benefits guidance together about how do you engage with the community on some of these things. And the big takeaway is engage early and often. You don't want the community to learn about your project when, you know, there is a public meeting for the first time that's being held by the city council. You need to let them know about your project way ahead of time, because if they don't, that's when the opposition comes in and it creates a lot of headaches at that time. So it can be used for both, and it will evolve over time. But one of the things that we had learned, and I think we talked about earlier too, is that some of the things that we've put together is not new. It's been done in other places before and by other people or by industry. But because it was the industry who pulled together some of the model ordinances, the communities, there's a bias there. They think that it is only helping the industry and not looking out for the communities. And so that is one of the reasons why we kind of redid some of that, took what was already done and put a more community voice on it and put our stamp on it, because we're kind of like the middleman. Although nobody trusts government anymore, so I don't know how helpful that is. But at one point, you know, I think they're more they're more open to accepting input and information coming from the state than from industry.
Something you said, first of all, thank you. And in your comment about really supporting local jurisdictions, I think resonates with me, and it reminded me of a story, a conversation that I had with a colleague who called, this was probably last year, and said, hey, we have a permit proposal. We're looking at I think it was like a megawatt solar project. The point of my story is that the person that was calling was the plans examiner. He was also the fire chief, the climate specialist, and a librarian in a very small jurisdiction. So understanding that he doesn't have the capacity, the knowledge base that a lot of larger jurisdictions. I think that was why I asked the question, because I see, at least in Colorado, there are a lot of rural areas that really are struggling to figure out how do we deal with these things as we start to really ramp up a lot of the development demands that cities and rural areas are starting to see, and they don't know where to start. So that's what intrigued me, I think, about the toolkit.
and what we're finding out with battery projects too, because that's huge now. Lots of moratoriums banning, you know, not wanting these projects in their communities. But in Kern County, the former fire chief there, he said it took him 3 to 4 years, like learning curve, just understanding the technology. And what was the technology 3-4 years ago, and I don't know if you know, the big fire that made the news all around, you know, the country, the Moss Landing fire, that was technology from 10 years ago. They don't make those anymore, but that's what the community holds on to. They see that in the news, and they're like, that's it. And so we're trying, you know, that's what we're pushing back on, and that's what, you know, some of the toolkit is supposed to help with as well. It's like, here's some real facts. That is old technology. Newer ones, there's still risk, but there is better mitigation tactics. And the firefighters are more trained on how to, you know, not use water for it, because you can't with these large utility scale projects. You just got to let it run. But there are now concerns about the environmental hazards of the runoff. What does it do to the water and things like that? So getting the communities educated, I think, is the biggest piece. And when they buy in, you know, a part of the stakeholder outreach is that we brought the communities along. And so they had some skin in the game. And so by the time that we were able to put it out, you know, there is more openness to adopting you know, what we had put out, because they had contributed to that.
Okay, we're going to move into the wonder with me phase of this conversation. And you can take this any way you want, but my question is, what signals tell you that a permitting system is actually working well? And what I mean by the question is, if we got it right, what would it actually look like? How would...
That's easy.
Yeah, all right,
Yeah.
you go.
So
I love that it's an easy question.
we started off with values in our speed task force. By the way, there's 34 members in this task force, and it's easy to remember. We're surrounded by the sea, so the acronym is C. safety, environment, and affordability. We meet those goals, that's a great system.
That sounds great in theory. How do you put that into practice?
Well, it jumps onto the bill that we passed this year. So, Leila, I want to say I'm very proud of it. It's SB 2673. It's a statewide permitting data standard. I think this crowd is very data-driven. Show of hands, who's here data-driven? Okay, we got some data-driven individuals. So what this does is it requires our state planning department, the county permitting agencies, and our chief data officer to develop a statewide permitting data standard, which requires the counties to publish monthly building and civil engineering permit data, requires a legislative report. So what I'm trying to say is that you are looking for laws that any company can come into and develop that framework. So this could be a dashboard, this could be a system, this could be an app, whatever it may be. We can now have data that we can reduce the length of permitting and follow that data to make sure that this is an efficient system. And to be honest, that person who was what, the police officer, the chief, and the librarian, that's efficient right there, if I ever saw one. And the other thing I would like to share, if you don't mind, one common theme that we notice with our working group is that most of these permitting salary folks are not getting enough for their compensation compared to the private sector. I think that's the truth on most of these departments. So we wanted to figure out a way to make sure that we pay these individuals a good salary so they can continue doing a good quality job. And we passed this year a pilot project for able to, all the counties can participate. However, the funding mechanism, it's only for the neighbor island because Oahu didn't want to use their 0.5% because they used their 0.5% for rail. And they really want to make sure that rail funding is secured. But all the other counties are able to use their 0.5% to offset permitting employees' salaries. So they are now better paid using this pilot project. And that's going to be huge because, I've been saying huge a lot. This is just a banner year for permitting. Oh, I got another one. Okay, that's 2 people who is actually appreciating the work that we're doing. So I just want to say these individuals are just not getting the salary that really is a living wage here in Hawaii. And we want to make sure that they're well paid for this job because permitting is a huge economic engine for any opportunities here in our state. And to have that backlog and delayed just hinders our economic growth. So those are the other 2 successes that we had in our task force work, which is not a social club.
I think, like the success can be measured by, like whatever happens upstream. If we can go all the way downstream and say, point to that and see that, hey, that thing was installed correctly, that it's safe, that more people are doing it, we're getting, a lot more deployments out that are being done correctly without having to do revisions over and over again, and even farther down the line than that we're having sort of renewable energy goals that are met, that's when we can say that the system is successful.
A permitting system that's successful, I think, is efficient and effective without cutting corners. So, but encompasses all the things that we've been talking about, right? It's breaking down the silos because in my myopic understanding, which is large-scale energy projects, it's multiple departments that may be asking the same thing from the applicants, but it's also the implementation and making things a little bit more quickly. And so incorporating technology to make it a little bit more efficient and effective as well. But can I say that permitting is just one thing out of the whole deployment? Like if we're talking soups to nuts, right? Like A through Z, you get the permit, but you got to construct, you got to do everything else. And so there is a workforce development, issue also as well. That's why things aren't getting built as fast, etc. So just want to.
It's also important, one thing, because if it doesn't get issued, then nothing happens. So I just want to also point out how important it is to fix that permitting issue.
Yeah, Miley, thanks for bringing that into the conversation. I think it's an important point. We stay pretty focused on this one topic, but you're absolutely right. As selfish as I am in wanting to ask all of the questions that I have in my head, I'm actually going to ask a couple from our audience members. But yeah, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to start. And I think the first one, Layla, is directly for you. And it was something you said in one of your comments earlier, and it's a request for a definition. So you use the term mechanized law, and the question is, could you explain what you meant? And I think the second part of that is, Representative, I think you wanted to respond to that, and perhaps I didn't give you a chance to do that. So if there was a response to the definition, I want to just give you that opportunity.
I think I responded to Layla's.
Okay.
Yeah. I do want to share one thing I think is very important. I just want to highlight Representative Sue Lee Loy, whose work on the building permit. I want to highlight Representative Tyson Miyake, who worked on the individual wastewater systems. I want to highlight Mike Lee, who worked on actually on the IWS, and then Mike Lee for the IWS and Tyson for the SHPD. Now Troy Hashimoto, Senator Troy Hashimoto, who's going to be working on the building codes. We have Sharon Moriwaki, Senator Sharon Moriwaki, who's going to be working on the wells and water permits. That's very important to Maui. Then we have Glenn Wakai, who's going to work on the land use district boundary amendment. We talked about land use. He's going to be covering that. Then we also have the council members getting involved in this task force leading the pigs, who's going to be Esther Kia Aina, who's going to look into the 201H process, as well as some other two council members. I just wanted to highlight some of those names because I want to ensure you that this is not just one person doing this work. There's so many other legislators who have really supported this effort and make sure that we can move forward. And it's not just the House, it's the Senate, and it's not just the state legislature, it's the council is involved. We're trying to break that silos where it's not the county just working on permitting issue. It's both the county and the state working together and talking to each other and communicating and making sure that we create a system that helps everybody, and not just the energy sector, but every industry out there. And I just wanted to point that out because it's very important. And the last thing, if you want to get involved, we go through Sunshine. Our fourth meeting is going to be on May 27th. It's in the Capitol website. Just go to the hearing notices. It's posted. You can participate. You can testify. You can get involved. You can share your recommendations. And your contributions would be very much appreciated in solving this problem. Thank you.
So I just want to respond to that question. So what I mean when I say mechanized laws is not data governance. Data governance is an important piece, for sure. There's no question about it. And there's great work being done in states like New York, have an open data portal for all of the data in the state, and that's been going on for a long time. What I mean when I say the laws should be mechanized is the laws shouldn't be written in English. They should be written in computer code. Nobody has done that. And there's no reason not to do that. I mean, you can have an English version of it. There's no problem with that. What I'm saying is we should give people the tools to create better tools of the things that are regulating our behavior. That's what I'm saying.
I just want to say I'm open to whatever that would look like. I personally
Then
don't
maybe
know
I'll help
how-
you pass it here first.
I don't know how to write it, but I got drafters, so let's figure it out.
Sounds good. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Love it.
Sounds really sci-fi.
Okay, I have about 17 questions here that we're not going to get to. I'm going to try to at least get to one more, but I do want to kind of throw this one at you in a little bit of a wrap up because we have about 4 minutes left. What's the one change that would make the biggest difference tomorrow? Maybe a little bit of an unfair question, but I'm anyone?
You know, I think
Remove Trump.
people
Sorry.
who are sorry.
Sorry, the answer just came out. Remove Trump. That was my one change.
No,
You know, I think that you know, just the openness to try new things. I think that you know, we can talk about technology all day long, but I think if we're you know, if we're scared of AI, or if we're using it too much, or you know, adopting systems that don't make sense just because the state told us to, or something like that, I think those are wrong. I think we need to be open to what makes sense for our communities, and you know, that human shift I think is harder to get over. You know, even when you have the best technology out there. That's not us. I'm just saying, even if there was the best technology out there.
Molly?
I'm not sure how to answer that. Are you just talking about permitting, or?
I am. Sorry, I should be a little bit more clear. But if you want to take it in another direction, we have 2 minutes and 50 seconds left, so by all means.
No, I just want to pull on that string, the comment I made a little bit earlier, that permit is, you know, a big thing to tackle and make it more efficient. But from my perspective and how I see project deployment, it is one of the many things. And I recently read something about, and I just saw it this morning, but the rebuild in LA from the fires last year, right? LA County implemented, streamlined their permitting system. Out of 3,400, you know, applications that went in to rebuild the house and stuff, they approve almost half, like LA City and LA County. But how many have been built? Very little. So just going back to that, we can streamline, we can make everything efficient, but what is the end goal? Like, that is just one aspect of it, and that's what I meant. And same thing with, I see large scale, utility scale, right? The permitting is one aspect of it and will always be there. But there are other things too. So just throwing a new nugget.
So the one thing would be communication, because I feel like there's so much silo right now in permitting. If we break down the walls and start communicating with the different agencies, and different departments, I think that could make a world of difference. Because you're not only going there for one permit, that's one agency. It's multiple agencies that has to touch this one permit. So if we're able to break that wall and break that silo, and they start communicating, I think that would be the biggest difference. And that's what I noticed with the task force members. This was the first time that the planning department heads we're talking to other department heads on the same table and comparing notes. And that just baffled me that they're not talking enough. And we created a space where they're able to talk and talk to other agencies as well. So that would be my one thing, is communications.
And I just thought of something. I mean, I think maybe I'll just leave with this: is that whatever we do, whether it's permitting or something else, I think when I think about like all the great entrepreneurs out there and all the wonderful inventions that we've had, some of them are even in this room. We want to build the kinds of things and we want to deliver the kinds of experiences to people that puts them in a position to feel like it was always this way. This experience is so good that it's almost like we can't imagine there was life without it. It was always this way that we had, this smartphone or this microwave or sliced bread or whatever you want to think about. That's the kind of thing we want to deliver. And we just have to think about what is that really intuitive, delightful experience that we want people to have. That's the thing that we should be striving towards.
I love it. I love it. We're out of time. I feel like we just start getting into the heart of the conversation. And so, again, there were a number of questions that I think that you all posed that we didn't get to. But again, I really want to encourage you to grab our panelists. Your ticket out of here is to help me give a round of applause to these amazing panelists.
And to our moderator,